Story 1. I've known Ethan since we were kids, growing up in the same neighborhood, always getting into some kind of trouble together. He's the kind of guy who'd rather be out in the woods than stuck inside. And I guess that's why it made sense when his family packed up and moved to this quiet, middle-of-nowhere town in Nebraska. Their place is massive, acres of open land, surrounded by fields that stretch out forever. Ethan's folks are real country, the type who wear boots every day and have a fridge stocked with beer. They've always treated me like family, so when Ethan invited me up for a fall weekend, I didn't think twice. I was 19, in my first year of college, while Ethan was working with his dad Tom, doing construction. It was a 4-hour drive from my dorm, the kind where you lose cell service and start seeing nothing but cornfields and gravel roads. When I pulled up to their house, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange. Ethan and Tom were already out back, sitting in lawn chairs cracking open beers. I grabbed my bag, tossed it inside, and joined them. The air was crisp, carrying that earthy smell of fall. Ethan's got this infectious grin, and he was already talking a mile a minute about all the trails we could hit with my Jeep. I'd never done any off-roading, but the way he described it, bouncing through the woods kicking up dirt, I was sold. Tom chimed in, laughing, saying we better not wreck my car. He fired up the grill, threw on some burgers, and we sat there, the three of us, just shooting the breeze as the stars started to poke through the sky. Tom's a big guy, tough but warm, the kind who'd give you the shirt off his back. After dinner, he said he was heading to a buddy's place, leaving me and Ethan to ourselves. Ethan's eyes lit up, and he started talking about this spot he'd always passed but never checked out. A creepy old church, abandoned for years, sitting next to a huge cornfield about a 20-minute bike ride away. It was the kind of place that looked like it had stories to tell, with boarded-up windows and overgrown grass. I don't know why, but the idea of sneaking out there at night felt exciting, like we were kids again, chasing adventure. Ethan said his family had a bunch of mountain bikes in the garage, all rigged with lights for night rides. We were both into fitness, so a long bike ride didn't faze us. As the sky turned dark, we started getting ready. Ethan grabbed a backpack, tossed in a bottle of whiskey, some soda, and a couple of flashlights. The night was quiet, just the sound of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. We picked out the two best bikes, their handlebar lights cutting through the darkness like tiny spotlights. As we pedaled down the gravel road, the air felt heavier, like the world was holding its breath. The fields around us seemed to go on forever, and every so often I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see something in the shadows. Ethan was ahead, leading the way, but I could tell he was feeling it too, that strange nagging sense that we weren't as alone as we thought. By the time we got to the abandoned church, the night had swallowed everything. The cornfield next to it rustled softly, and the overgrown grass around the building made it feel like we'd stepped into another world. Ethan and I stashed our bikes just inside the cornfield, out of sight from the road. We didn't turn on our flashlights yet. We didn't want to draw attention. The church's windows were tall and arched, definitely old, but too dark to see through. We were thinking about sneaking inside, maybe getting some cool photos for Instagram. I pressed my face against a window, squinting, and Ethan handed me a flashlight. When I flicked it on, the beam cut through the gloom, and we both froze. There, in the pews, was a shape, a head, hunched over, facing away. It didn't move. Ethan whispered. It looked like a mannequin, but I wasn't so sure. We made a dumb bet. Him saying it was a prop, me joking it was some drunk guy passed out. We crept to the front door, but it was boarded up tight. Ethan shook it, just to see, but it didn't budge. He grinned, saying that proved he won the bet. No way anyone could get in. I told him to hold off. We needed a better look. We circled to another window, the one with the best angle. I shone the light again, but the pew was empty. Whatever was there was gone. My stomach dropped. Ethan laughed nervously, asking where it went. I swept the flashlight around, and then we both saw it at the same time. A man, standing just inside the window, staring right at us. His face was pale, eyes locked on ours, and he didn't look homeless or drunk. We bolted, sprinting toward the cornfield, hearts pounding. The corn stalks whipped at our faces as we fumbled for our bikes, but it was too dark, and panic made us clumsy. A loud slam echoed from the church, like a door crashing shut. Ethan hissed at me to stay quiet. Then we heard it, rustling in the corn, close, like someone was pushing through. It stopped, and the silence was worse. We crouched, barely breathing, too scared to move. After what felt like forever, Ethan whispered, asking where the bikes were. Before I could answer, the stalks right next to us exploded with movement, someone running straight at us. I yelled, "Go!" and we tore through the corn, stumbling into the open back to the road. We didn't look back, just ran until we couldn't hear anything chasing us. Ethan called his dad, and Tom picked us up in his truck, more worried than mad. The next morning, he drove us back, his shotgun in the cab. We found the bikes in the corn, tossed them in the truck, and were about to leave when I glanced at the church. There, in a window, was the same man watching us. He didn't move, just stepped back into the shadows when he saw us notice. Tom cursed under his breath, said we needed to get out of there. Even he was rattled, and that guy's seen it all. We grabbed barbecue later, trying to shake it off, and Tom called the town to report someone squatting in the church. They said they'd check it out, but who knows if they did. I still think about that guy, wondering who he was and why he was watching us in the dark. Story 2. I've been living on this farm in Iowa for years. Just me in the wide open fields. It's a quiet life, but it suits me, especially after losing my fiance a few years back. I haven't really tried to move on. Not yet. My brother Ben and his wife live with me, splitting the work during the busy season. But when October rolls around and the harvest winds down, they're usually off traveling. That leaves me alone in our old farmhouse, the kind with creaky floors and walls so thin you hear every gust of wind. It's peaceful, but sometimes the silence gets heavy, especially at night. This was one of those nights, early October, with the air crisp and the windows still open to let in that cool fall breeze. I was slouched in my recliner, half watching some old western on television, trying to ignore the way the empty house felt too big. Ben and his wife were a couple of towns over, visiting friends, so I was holding down the fort. It's not unusual to hear critters outside. Coyotes, owls, the usual. But this night was different. Out of nowhere, a scream cut through the air, sharp and desperate, like it came from a woman or maybe a teenage girl. It was so raw it made my skin crawl. I shot up, heart racing, and grabbed my rifle from the gun safe in my bedroom. Stepping onto the porch, the chilly air hit me, and I stood there, listening. The scream came again, fainter but unmistakable, from the cornfield across the yard. It's a big field, rows and rows of drying stalks, and in the dark, it's like a maze. I fired a warning shot into the air, the crack echoing over the fields. It could have been kids messing around, but it didn't feel like a prank. Then I heard a woman's voice yell, "Help!" before everything went dead quiet, just the wind rustling the corn. I shouted, "Who's out there? Where are you?" but got nothing back. I flipped on every outdoor light, grabbed my phone, and called 911 as I started walking toward the field. The operator kept me on the line, asking questions, while I called out into the darkness, hoping for a response. My flashlight barely cut through the shadows between the stalks. It felt like the field was watching me, like something was out there, just out of sight. 4 cops showed up not long after, their flashlights bobbing as they spread out, shouting for anyone who needed help. We combed through the corn for what felt like hours, but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone. The cops were thorough, probably because a scream like that isn't something you ignore. One of them told me to call again if I heard anything else, said they'd be nearby. They left, and I stood on the porch, staring at the field one last time before heading inside. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and tried to convince myself it was just local kids pulling a stunt. Kids around here get bored, and spooking farmers isn't unheard of. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The scream had been too real, too full of fear. I settled back into my recliner, the television flickering, but my ears were still tuned to the night outside, waiting for something to break the silence again. Back in the house, I tried to shake off the unease from the Cornfield search, but it clung to me like damp air. The television was still on, droning in the background, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about that scream, how it cut through the night like a blade. I figured I'd head to bed, maybe take some melatonin to quiet my racing mind. I'm a chronic insomniac, and nights like this don't help. As I climbed the stairs, I realized I'd left the downstairs windows open, letting the October breeze flow through. The house felt alive with little noises, creaks, groans, the usual. But then, maybe an hour after I drifted off, I heard something sharper, clunks from downstairs, like someone moving around. My eyes snapped open, and I lay there, heart thumping, telling myself it was just the house settling. Then it came again, a distinct creak of the floorboards. I grabbed my phone and called my brother Ben, whispering so my voice wouldn't carry. He was still a few towns away. "You home?" I asked. "No," he said, and my whole body went cold. Every hair stood up, and I knew I wasn't alone. I told him to call the cops, that someone was in the house. He didn't ask questions, just hung up to make the call. I crept to my gun safe, wincing as the floor squeaked under me. My shotgun was heavy in my hands, a small comfort. Downstairs, the sounds grew clearer. Soft footsteps, the rustle of the breeze through those open windows. I eased open my bedroom door, peering down the dark stairway. The moonlight barely reached the living room, and I could feel eyes on me, though I saw nothing. I started down the stairs, trying to be silent, but the old wood betrayed me with every step. Then, at the bottom, a tall, skinny figure stepped into view, just a silhouette against the dim light. I cocked the shotgun and yelled, "Don't move!" He didn't flinch, just walked calmly out of sight, his footsteps picking up into a run through the living room, out the back door. I shouted, "Stop!" but didn't chase him. My legs wouldn't move. I locked the door, hands shaking, and checked every window, slamming them shut. Ben called back saying the cops were coming. When they arrived, it was the same officers from earlier. They searched the property, flashlights sweeping the yard, but found no one. One cop offered to stay on the property overnight, which I appreciated, though I doubted that guy was coming back after seeing my gun. A few days later, during the last harvest, I was in the combine when I spotted something in the field, a woman's shoe, size 8.5, just lying there among the stalks. My stomach twisted, thinking back to that scream, that man in my house. I called 911 again, left the shoe untouched for evidence. The police came, brought dogs, searched the field, but found nothing else. No missing person reports matched. That shoe haunts me, sitting in some evidence locker. I pray the owner is alive, but the thought that something awful happened on my land keeps me up at night, wondering if he's still out there, watching from the dark. Story 3. Growing up, my family had this little vacation spot in rural Georgia, a 3-bedroom mobile home that wasn't much to look at but felt like a second home. It was me, my older brother Ryan, and my younger brothers Noah and Eli. 4 of us, always running wild. I was about 12 at the time, Ryan was 14, Noah was 10, and Eli was just 8. We'd pile into the car every summer, and as soon as we hit those long empty roads lined with farms and fields, we knew we were close. The mobile home was basic. No fancy amenities, just electricity, an old television we hooked our PlayStation to, and a porch where our parents would sip coffee while we explored. We had our favorite spots, a playground at the local elementary school where we'd play tag, a grocery store we turned into our personal game zone, and the woods around the property that felt like an endless adventure. The nearest neighbors were a good walk away, but the roads were so quiet. Barely any cars, just the occasional pickup from someone who lived down the dead-end street. That summer was the first time our parents let Eli tag along for our explorations, trusting Ryan to keep us in line. We decided to wander down a road we hadn't taken before, one that veered off from the dead end. It was peaceful, the kind of place where you could hear your own footsteps on the gravel. About a half-mile down, we spotted this old house on a small hill, next to a shed and a patchy cornfield. It looked abandoned. No cars, no lights, no signs of life. We'd been coming to Georgia for years and never saw anyone there, which made it feel like a mystery waiting to be solved. The cornfield was small but dense, the stalks browning in the summer heat, and the woods nearby added to the eerie vibe. To us, it was the perfect spot for hide-and-seek tag. The sun was high, so we felt bold, like nothing could touch us. Ryan, being the oldest, was the seeker first. He turned away, counting, while the rest of us scattered. I bolted for the cornfield, figuring the stalks would hide me best. As I ducked between the rows, the air felt thick, like the field was holding its breath. I crouched low, listening to the faint rustle of the corn in the breeze. Ryan's voice called out, "Ready or not, here I come." And I grinned, thinking I had the best spot. But as I sat there, waiting, I started to feel it, that prickling on the back of my neck, like someone was watching. The cornfield, so fun in the daylight, suddenly felt too quiet, too closed in. I told myself it was just Noah or Eli sneaking around, but the feeling grew heavier, like eyes were on me from somewhere I couldn't see. I shifted, trying to stay still, but every little sound, the snap of a stalk, the crunch of dry leaves, made my heart skip. It wasn't just the game anymore. Something about that place felt wrong, like we'd stumbled into someone else's territory. I didn't know it then, but that was just the start of what would turn our carefree summer game into something we'd never forget. The game of hide-and-seek tag at the abandoned house had felt thrilling at first, but as the day wore on, that uneasy feeling from the cornfield stuck with me. I'd heard rustling in the stalks while hiding, too close to be one of my brothers, and when I asked them later, none of them had been near me. It spooked me, but we brushed it off, thinking maybe it was an animal or the wind. That night, we decided to up the stakes and play flashlight tag at the same spot. Our mom wasn't thrilled about Eli joining us after dark, so it was just me, Ryan, and Noah. Ryan was 14, old enough in our parents' eyes to keep us safe, so they let us go. By the time we reached the house, it was nearly pitch black, the hill and cornfield swallowed by shadows. The air felt heavier, like the night was pressing in. I was the seeker this time, so I turned my back, counted to 60, and shouted, "I'm coming!" I kept my flashlight off to avoid giving myself away, navigating by the faint moonlight. The house loomed silent, no lights, no sound but the crickets. I checked around the shed, peered into the trees, but saw nothing. I knew someone was probably in the cornfield. It was too good a hiding spot. I crept toward it, the stalks towering over me, and slipped inside, trying not to crunch the dry leaves underfoot. The darkness was suffocating, every rustle making my pulse race. Then I heard it. Footsteps, deliberate, moving through the corn nearby. I froze, thinking it was Ryan or Noah, and waited for the right moment. When the steps got close, I flicked on my flashlight and yelled, "Got you!" But what I saw wasn't my brother. It was a man, his back to me. Running from the light, I shouted, "Who's that? You're out!" And then came this low, creepy laugh. Not a kid's, not even close. A voice, soft and rough, said, "Can I play with you guys?" I swung the flashlight, catching half his face through the stalks. It looked wrong, twisted, like a mask or something worse. My blood ran cold. I bolted out of the corn, screaming for Ryan and Noah, yelling, "Run! Game over!" Their voices called back from near the shed, and I saw their flashlights bobbing as they ran down the hill. I turned mine on, sprinting after them, not daring to look back. We didn't stop until we reached our mobile home, gasping, out of breath. I told them about the man, how his face looked deformed, how he'd been in the corn with me earlier too. Their eyes were wide, scared in a way I'd never seen. When we told our parents, Dad looked confused, and said no one lived at that house. Mom banned us from going out at night. And honestly, I was fine with that. I couldn't sleep, picturing that man lurking outside our windows in the dark. The next day, we stayed close to the mobile home, too shaken to explore. A few years later, our family sold the place, and we never went back to that house on the hill. Even now, I wonder who he was, hiding in the corn, watching us play, waiting for the dark to join in. That feeling of being watched, out there in the middle of nowhere, never really leaves you.